Hi guys, I know I'm really late with this video. I was supposed to have it done on Friday and things happened. I have 13 minutes to make this video before I have to leave, so it's not going to be a really in-depth video, and I also didn't have time to really analyze the book and like take notes on it and stuff. So all I have is the notes that I took while I was reading. So I read The Crooked House, or I think it's just Crooked House, I don't think it's The Crooked House, but Crooked House by Agatha Christie. And I have this really old copy from 1949. I think I got it from my mom, or maybe my dad, but I inherited it, and yeah, it's really old. It's still in pretty good condition for being a 60-something-year-old book. So first of all, a little background. This book was written in the 40s, so there's a lot of World War II references. So the book first starts out with the main character Charles explaining how he knows the other main character, Sophia, and he talks about their brief relationship. You know, they just talked, and she didn't really tell him a lot about her family, and she was very brief. So they sort of kind of agreed to get married when he comes back from the war, and so he does come back and talks to her and meets up with her and everything, and she's like, this horrible thing has happened. Her grandfather has been murdered, and she's like, I can't marry you until we figure this out. And he's like, okay, that's fine, and his dad's a police officer, a detective, so he's like, okay, I'll just help out. First of all, there's her grandfather, Aristide, I think is how you pronounce his name, I'm not sure, but he was murdered, obviously, and they're having some issues with his will because they can't find his will, and then when they find the will, it brings up, like, who could have benefited most, and oh, it's so crazy. Anyway, he married the much younger woman named Brenda, and of course everyone looks to her as the murder suspect because she's quite a bit younger than he was, and they assume that she was trying to get his money. Then there's Lawrence, who's not in the family. He's the tutor for Sophia's brother and sister. He kind of has this quasi-relationship with Brenda. It's not substantiated. Then there's Edith de Havilland, and I think that she's Sophia's great aunt, her grandmother's sister, so her grandfather's sister-in-law, who comes to stay with them and is their quasi-mother. Her brother, Eustace, he's a queer one. He's not all that different from any other rich... What are you doing? You see this? Eustace is not all that different from children that we consider to be rich today. And then there's Josephine, Sophia's sister, who wants to be a detective when she gets older, and everyone tells her that women can't be detectives because it's the 40s, and she's adamant to prove them wrong, and she carries around this little black book and writes down observations in it. Then there's Nanny, obviously their nanny. She doesn't play a big role, but the information that she gives them is sort of significant. Magda is Sophie's mother, and she is very, very dramatic. She thinks that she is constantly living in a play, and she just acts out everything, and she feels like she needs to be acting all the time instead of actually portraying her feelings. She just kind of wastes the family's money putting on plays, and she's so demanding. Philip is Sophia's father and Magda's husband, and I don't know much about him. He has this issue with his brother Roger, who has always been kind of the family favorite. He kind of just sits in his office all day and doesn't pay attention, and he especially doesn't pay attention to his children. He does talk to Sophia occasionally because she's an adult and they have something to talk about, but his two youngest, like, he gets a tutor for them and he doesn't really talk to them, and they do comment that their father is absent most of the time. Roger is Sophia's uncle, and he runs a company, I think it's a catering company. Roger is married to Clemency, and they don't have any children, and Clemency enjoys the challenge of being what they call, like, poverty, but what I would call, like, middle class. She and Roger kind of have that in common, but Roger doesn't want her to not be provided for. So each of them has their own reasons to want Aristide dead, and they each have had opportunity. Like, nobody is accounted for when the bad things happen, so the police pretty much, they have a ton of suspects, but they can't pinpoint anyone, and the obvious solution would be Brenda, because she was young and she wanted his money. Because it was written in the 40s, the syntax and word usage and phrases that she uses are much different than what a current author would use, especially for a mystery story. So the word usage and syntax that she uses they're definitely from the 40s, and it can be a little stressful for the modern day reader. There were some times where I was frustrated with how she worded things, and, you know, her use of commas. There were a few words that I had to look up because I just didn't know them, but it wasn't, I could figure it out based on context. It wasn't that big of a deal. The older dialect and, you know, word choice was actually really nice. Yeah, the word choice is definitely representative of the time period. The chapters were pretty short. They were only, like, between 5 and 8 pages long. They were only between, like, 5 and 8 pages long, so I could pause and stop and get up if I had to. Of course, all of the chapters were cliffhangers. I love her writing style. It's great. She does kind of string you along until the very end, as far as who's the murderer, but it was definitely very entertaining. I'm actually gonna give this a 4-ish out of 5. It's like a 4.5 out of 5. Nothing really detracted from the story. They were just things that I feel could have been better, as far as divulging the information to us in a way that would have obfuscated the finding of the true killer. So I feel that maybe there could have been a little bit more mind games in there, but still, 4.5, 4 out of 5. Definitely would recommend this. Even though it is a murder mystery and it's supposedly an adult book, it's a 1940s murder mystery adult book. Not a lot of violence. There are 3 quasi-violent acts. There's no gore. It's much more subdued than the kinds of things that I'll be reading for the rest of the month. I would say probably anyone from the age 15 up would be appropriate for. Words might be a little difficult for someone younger, someone who doesn't have as much experience with larger words. If I had a kid who was 15, I'd probably let them read it, and if they can't deal with the big words, give them a dictionary. So next week, I'm going to read The Unseen by Heather Graham. I purchased this book within the last year, I believe, and it might be in one of my book hauls. However, it was literally the first one on the top of the pile, so it's the one that I'm choosing. Women are being murdered in this specific hotel room in San Antonio, Texas. They're hundreds of years apart, and in the recent months, a lot of dead bodies have been found, and this one woman, Kelsey O'Brien, who is a U.S. Marshal, has been brought in to help figure out what's going on. She has to work with this Logan guy, who is a Texas Ranger, apparently, and it's Heather Graham, so it's gonna be brutal. I read The Dead Room by Heather Graham years ago. It was actually maybe when I was in middle school, it was middle school. Yeah, it was definitely middle school. And for like 13-year-old me, it was shocking. And then my parents found out that I had read it, and my mom made my dad read through it and make sure that there was nothing really inappropriate. So I was banned from reading Heather Graham for a couple of years until, I can't remember what book I read. I had my mom read it first to make sure it was okay, and I was probably like 15 or 16. My mom said that personally she would hate it, but she didn't think that it was inappropriate for me, and ever since then I've been reading Heather Graham, and I love her. She has great writing style, and she's just a great author all around. So this is the first time that I will be actually reviewing one of her books, even though I've read quite a few of them. Anyway, this is next week, and the list for the rest of the month is on Goodreads. Oh, wait. This isn't next week. This is in a couple days. I'll have this done by Friday, which is in 2 days. So thank you for watching. I gotta get to class.